Hello everyone, this is Fanfic Audiobook. Here you find original fan made audio stories.
In DXD, Reincarnated as a Incubus. Part 3. Bishop. As soon as these words were spoken, aside from Rias and Akino who were already mentally prepared, Yuto and Kaneko both showed looks of surprise. Turning a former church nun, the possessor of a sacred gear with holy healing powers, into a reincarnated devil. This idea was incredibly bold. Asia was even more shocked, covering her mouth with her eyes wide open. Shirakami Kaide stood up, walked over to Asia, and squatted down to look her in the eye, speaking seriously. Asia, I know what you're hesitating about. You're worried that after becoming a devil, you'll no longer be able to pray to your Lord, and you won't be able to hold on to your faith, right? Asia nodded subconsciously. This was indeed the biggest hurdle in her heart. However, Shirakami Kaide shook his head, his voice gentle and persuasive. But Asia, have you ever considered a question? Why should becoming a devil prevent you from keeping your faith? Asia was stunned. Faith comes from the heart. What does it have to do with race or status? If your Lord truly is a merciful, benevolent, and inclusive deity, would he reject a believer whose heart remains devout and who still upholds the conviction of saving lives, simply because you became a devil? If he would, then is such a narrow-minded Lord, who judges based on race and identity truly worth your steadfast devotion? And the current church, which branded you a heretic and expelled you just because you saved a life, does such a church truly represent your faith? Shirakami Kaide's words were like a heavy hammer, striking Asia's heart. She had never thought about it from this perspective before, and for a moment, her mind was in a state of chaos. You are all alone, carrying a great treasure, facing a crazed pursuer like Friedrich, a greedy fallen angel like Rainer, and potentially others from different factions who covet what you have. How long can you hide? Next time, will you be lucky enough to run into us again? Shirakami Kaide's tone carried a hint of gravity. Instead of struggling in fear and loneliness, and possibly losing your life, why not choose a place that can protect you, accept you, and allow you to continue practicing your belief in saving lives? Here, you can still believe in your Lord and use your power to help those in need, including us, devils. Isn't that just another form of service? His words were logical and reasonable, pointing out the harsh reality while offering a new possibility for the continuation of her faith. Asia stared blankly at Shirakami Kaide, the light in her eyes flickering uncertainly. She had to admit that what Shirakami Kaide said made a lot of sense. The current church had already abandoned her, while the people here had accepted her. If the Lord truly was omniscient, omnipotent, and merciful, how could he not perceive her true heart? At this moment, Rias also stood up, walked to Asia, and reached out to gently pull her into an embrace. This action caused Asia's body to stiffen, but she immediately felt a warm sense of security. Asia, Rias's voice carried a rare softness and determination. I don't care who you were in the past or where you came from. I only know that in that warehouse, when you were clearly so afraid, you still stood up and used your power to help us and protect Kaneko. From that moment on, you were a companion we recognized and wanted to protect. If you are willing to stay and become our family, the doors of the Grimoire family will always be open to you. You can continue to believe in your deity and use your power to do what you believe is right. I, Rias Grimoire, swear in the name of my family that I will protect your safety and freedom. I welcome you as well, Asia-chan tilde, Akino said with a smile. The club finally has a cuter junior. If you become a companion, I will protect you, Kaneko said briefly but firmly. Healing abilities are crucial in battle. Miss Asia, your joining would be a powerful asset, Yuto added sincerely. Everyone's words were like a warm current, washing away the unease and confusion in Asia's heart. The bitterness of wandering alone, the warmth of being accepted, the rethink of her faith, the anticipation for the future, various emotions intertwined, finally turning into a burst of tears. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Asia wept uncontrollably in Rias's arms. Those were tears of relief and emotion. I'm willing. I'm willing to stay and become everyone's companion. If I can become Miss Rias's servant and use this power to help everyone. I'm willing. Rias smiled with relief and gently patted her back. She let go of Asia, took a step back, and raised her hand with a solemn expression. A bishop, piece, shimmering with pure white light, emerged from her palm, emitting a gentle yet powerful devil's power. In the name of Grimoire, and by the authority of the devil piece, I hereby forge a new master-servant contract, Rias chanted. Asia Argento, accept this, bishop, peace, become my servant, and walk with us. Asia wiped away her tears. Though her face bore tear marks, she bloomed with a determined and holy smile. She closed her eyes, clasped her hands in front of her chest, and for the last time as a human nun, offered a brief and devout prayer to the Lord she believed in. Merciful Lord, thank you for granting me the power to heal. No matter what lies ahead, I am willing to use this power to continue practicing the path of life, saving and protecting. Amen. After finishing her prayer, she opened her eyes and reached out toward the white bishop piece. The piece turned into a beam of light and sank into her chest. A warm power flowed through her entire body, transforming her constitution and constructing new magic circuits. She could feel a solid connection established between herself and Rias, and she also felt that the healing power within her originating from her sacred gear seemed to create a strange resonance with this newborn devil's power, without any conflict. The reincarnation was complete. Asia Argento had officially become Rias Grimoire's servant devil, bishop. Feeling her newborn strength, she subconsciously tried to pray to the Lord again, imagining that familiar connection. Suddenly, she clutched her forehead and let out a soft cry, a hint of pain and confusion appearing on her face. My head, it hurts a bit, the sensation of prayer, seems to be blocked by something. Seeing this, everyone was stunned for a moment before they all began to laugh. It was a laugh of understanding and kindness. Shirakami Kaide walked to her side and comforted her gently. It's okay, Asia. This is just temporary discomfort caused by the system conversion. Don't forget, you're a devil now. The channel for prayer might be a bit different. But, he winked, who says a devil can't pray to God? Perhaps it just needs a little time, or a small system update, and that merciful Lord will receive your signal again. After all, sincere faith shouldn't be bound by form. His words weren't entirely nonsense. In the original story, Archangel Michael indeed modified the system later, allowing Asia, who was a devil, and another knight, Zenobia, to gain the qualification to pray. Asia looked up, meeting Shirakami Kaide's gentle and encouraging gaze, and feeling everyone's kind smiles, the sliver of panic in her heart quietly dissipated. She believed Shirakami Kaide's words and believed in her own choice. Her face reddened slightly as she said softly, yes. I understand. Thank you, Mr. Bai Shufeng. The living room was suddenly filled with a warm atmosphere. As Asia's matter came to an end, the warm atmosphere in the living room eased slightly, and everyone's attention naturally returned to Shirakami Kaide. Rias looked at him with inquiry, tenderness, and a trace of lingering fear that had not yet completely dissipated. She gently pursed her lips and finally asked the question that had been circling in her mind for a long time. Shirakami Kaide, about your method of contracting servants. Her gaze inadvertently swept over the position of her lower abdomen, then glanced at the smiling Akino beside her. Both Akino and I, only when we had relatively deep magical or physical contact with you did that special contract magic circle appear. This form. I have consulted some extremely ancient forbidden records, and it seems related to legendary high-ranking succubi, yet it is also different. Do you understand what is going on yourself? This question also piqued the interest of Yuto, Kaneko, and even the newly joined and somewhat confused Asia. After all, this contracting method was truly too strange and ambiguous. Shirakami Kaide scratched his head, showing a somewhat troubled yet honest expression. To be honest, President, I don't understand the principle at all myself, it's just a very vague feeling. When my connection with you all, or rather the intimacy, accumulates to a certain point, I have a premonition that it's possible. Then, by focusing my thoughts, that power automatically activates and forms a contract. He told a part of the truth. It did indeed require the affection level and physical intimacy to reach a certain degree, and it was triggered by his active use of a contract coupon. After listening, Rias nodded thoughtfully, her finger lightly tapping her chin. Accumulating intimacy to a certain point and then being actively triggered by you. This does coincide with some scattered records I know about certain ancient succubus talents. The core of a succubus's power is closely related to connection, emotion, and desire. High-level succubi can even establish a master-servant bond far exceeding ordinary contracts through deep soul resonance and emotional links. It seems that the bloodline in your body has brought you not only traits but also a corresponding, unique system of abilities. She looked at Akino and Asia, her expression becoming serious. The fact that Shirakami Kaide may possess a special succubus bloodline, as well as the specific details of this contracting method, must be kept strictly confidential and limited to the members of our club. To the outside world, he is just a Grimoire family pawn, with a sacred gear and good potential, understood. Understood tilde. Akino replied easily, but a playful glint of, a secret only we know, flashed in her eyes. Yes, President. Yuto and Kaneko also answered solemnly. Although Asia only half understood, she also nodded vigorously. I won't tell anyone. Alright, it's getting late, time to go to school. Rias stood up, regaining her efficiency as the president. Shirakami Kaide, if your body can handle it, come along too. You need to make up for missed classes and club activities. No problem, President. Shirakami Kaide also stood up, feeling that although his magic had not recovered, normal movement was no longer an issue. The group left the villa and walked toward Kuo Academy. Along the way, Rias and Akino naturally walked on both sides of Shirakami Kaide. Although there were no overly intimate actions, the invisible, closer than before atmosphere made occasional passing students turn their heads. Kaneko followed behind expressionlessly, while Asia lowered her head shyly, following closely, but her eyes occasionally looked at the surrounding campus environment with curiosity. Erotic Feng, Kaneko suddenly spat out again, glancing at Shirakami Kaide, who was surrounded by the two seniors. Shirakami Kaide. I'm being framed. The underworld, the private study of Lucifer, Sears's Grimoire. The room was spacious and elegant, more like a scholarly noble's library than a devil king's office. Sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows, casting dappled shadows on the carpet. Sears's was not sitting behind his ornate desk but stood in the middle of the room, with a light screen composed of pure magic floating in front of him. The screen was silently playing a video. It was the entire process in the abandoned warehouse where Shirakami Kaide, after Rias agreed to the promotion, activated Time Stop, condensed a light spear, and killed Rainer in one blow. The image was clear, and one could even feel the intense fluctuation of energy at that time. Beside Sears's, the silver-haired Graphia Lucifuge stood quietly, analyzing every detail in the video. When the image finally froze at the moment Rainer dissipated into light and Shirakami Kaide coughed up blood and collapsed, Sears's waved his hand, and the light screen vanished. The study was quiet for a moment. Graphia. Sears's turned around, his usual gentle smile fading, revealing the depth and calmness belonging to a devil king. In your eyes, what do you think of Shirakami-kun's strike? Graphia bowed slightly and spoke clearly. Lord Lucifer. First, the most noteworthy thing is not the power of this strike, but its composition. He successfully used the power of light. Although through some kind of imitation or transformation ability, the form and power reached or even exceeded the level of an ordinary middle-class fallen angel, and it did not cause a violent conflict or backlash with his own devil magic. This is extremely rare among devils, one could even say it's a phenomenon that defies common sense. This may be related to the special bloodline in his body or the harmonizing ability of the sacred gear. She paused slightly and continued. Secondly, his tactics and decisiveness are worth commending. In an extremely disadvantageous situation, he keenly captured the key opportunity when the enemy's target changed, and decisively applied for and obtained Queen Peace promotion authority from Lady Rias. This application itself reflects a reasonable use of battlefield rules and trust and cooperation with the king's tactical intentions. Thirdly, power control and burst. After obtaining temporary high magic and authority, he could relatively stably bear and channel the power of 10 boosts into a specific skill instead of blindly venting it, showing energy driving potential and a cool head beyond his current level. Of course, this exceeded his body's limits, leading to severe backlash, but considering it was his first attempt at such a high-load combination in actual combat, his performance has far exceeded expectations. Grafia finally summarized. Overall, what Lord Shirakami Kaide showed in this battle was more of his own awakened special abilities, excellent combat intuition, fast learning and growth ability, and compatibility with the team. The sacred gear, boosted gear, mainly served as a power multiplier in this battle rather than relying on its inherent skills. This precisely shows that his potential is huge, and his growth direction is not completely limited by the artifact. There are more possibilities in the future. If given correct guidance and systematic training, in time, he will surely become a powerful combat force that cannot be ignored under Lady Rias, and even in the underworld. Her evaluation was extremely objective and fair, without any exaggeration, but the implicit praise and affirmation of Shirakami Kaide's potential were clearly discernible. Sears listened quietly, and that pleasant smile reappeared on his face. It's basically consistent with my judgment. This child is indeed a surprising treasure. Rias's luck, or rather her eye for talent, has always been good. Then, his tone shifted, his smile vanished, and a hint of coldness entered his voice. However, the person behind this attack needs to pay the price. That crazy priest named Fried Selzen, and those fallen angels, especially their possible masterminds. Grafia, use your channels to investigate thoroughly. I don't want any more inexplicable bugs running wild in my sister's territory and almost hurting her important servant. As you command, Lord Lucifer. Grafia bowed without hesitation. I will start the investigation immediately and give you an answer as soon as possible. Sears nodded, his gaze once again cast toward where the light screen had disappeared. He pondered for a moment, then suddenly looked at Grafia, who was about to turn and leave, and asked in a slightly smiling tone. By the way, Grafia. Besides the investigation, would you be interested in personally teaching this interesting little treasure? Grafia paused slightly as she was about to leave. She turned around and looked at Sears calmly, seemingly not very surprised by this proposal. After a moment of silence, Grafia Lucifuge, hailed as the silver-haired Annihilation Queen, and one of the underworld's strongest servant queens, nodded gently. I understand, Lord Lucifer, her cold voice echoed in the study. If this is your wish, and if Lady Rias does not object, I will conduct some basic assessment and guidance for him at an appropriate time. After all, she paused and added, given the characteristics and potential he has shown so far, conventional devil training methods may not be entirely applicable. Sears smiled with satisfaction. Then I'll leave it to you, Grafia. I believe that with your instruction, he will avoid many detours and more quickly master how to correctly utilize that special power. Grafia bowed slightly again, her figure melting into the shadows as she exited the study silently. Sears stood alone by the window, gazing at the unique scenery of the underworld outside, his fingers lightly tapping the windowsill. Shirakami Kaide. Succubus bloodline, the recognition of the Red Dragon Emperor, unique contracts and abilities, and Rias's feelings. He murmured to himself, his eyes flashing with a wise and expectant light. This is getting more and more interesting. The future of the underworld might gain many variables because of you. Let's see how far you can go. Far away in the human world at Kuo Academy, Shirakami Kaide, who was being sandwiched by Rias and Akino as they walked toward the school building, suddenly shivered for no reason, a chill running down his spine. What's wrong? Does the wound hurt again? Rias immediately asked with concern. No, it's nothing. I might have just caught a bit of a cold. Shirakami Kaide rubbed his nose, but he had an inexplicable bad feeling that he was being remembered by some formidable existence. He didn't know yet that he had already been placed on a special tutoring list by one of the underworld's top educators. It seemed his good days were still ahead of him. In the second-year classroom of the Kuo Academy High School Division, the afternoon sunlight poured through the windows, bringing a drowsy warmth. On the podium, the math teacher was talking incessantly about complex trigonometric functions. Below, Shirakami Kaide appeared to be staring at the blackboard, but his eyes had long since lost focus. His consciousness was fully submerged in the system interface within his mind. First, he clicked on the servant interface. Rias Grimoire. Status: Servant, Succubus Contract, King Devil Peace Contract. Affection level: 85, Love, Trust, Possessiveness. Lust value: 68, Stable, maintained through daily contact and contract link. Himahima Akino. Status: Servant, Succubus Contract, Companion, Devil Peace Contract. Affection level: 73, High recognition, intimacy, desire to explore. Lust value: 87, rising due to the new contract and intimate interactions. Looking at the status of the two, especially the affection level and lust value that clearly exceeded ordinary companionship, a sense of warmth and a trace of masculine pride rose in Shirakami Kaide's heart. He then checked the data for the others. Kaneko Tuju. Affection level: 41, recognition, viewed as a reliable but troublesome companion. Lust value: 5, almost no fluctuation, occasional slight urge to complain due to the host's perverted behavior. Status: increased recognition of the host's strength and responsibility. Asia Argento. Affection level: 45, gratitude, trust, budding hazy affection. Lust value: 15, slight fluctuations due to close contact and the experience of being rescued. Status: gradually adapting to the new environment, feels strong gratitude and curiosity toward the host. Kaneko's affection level increase was expected, after all, they had gone through a life and death battle together. Asia's starting point of 45 affection level was good, she was gentle and kind, and since he was the one who proposed she stay, further increases shouldn't be too difficult. Alright, time to see how to spend the points. Shirakami Kaide rubbed his hands, looking at the remaining 310 points, feeling suddenly wealthy. Skill points are always the hard currency, let's start with 10. He unhesitatingly spent 100 points to buy 10 skill points. Points remaining, 210. He now had 12 skill points in hand. Mirror reflection has huge potential, I must level it up. He invested 3 skill points. Consumed 3 skill points, mirror reflection LV2 right pointing arrow LV5. Effect significantly increased. The completion and power of copied skills are notably improved. Skill analysis ability enhanced, allowing for more detailed energy composition and weakness information. Added slight, adaptive memory. For successfully copied skills, the cost of the next copy is reduced and completion is increased. Clairvoyance is linked to predicting the future, it must be upgraded. He invested another 3 skill points. Consumed 3 skill points, clairvoyance LV5 right pointing arrow LV8. There wasn't much to say after the upgrade, it simply strengthened the passive prediction after sensing danger and extended the duration of future sight. The 2 core support skills were upgraded, using 6 points, leaving 6 points. Next was the top priority, making up for his shortcomings. Shirakami Kaide knew very well that his biggest problem right now was magic capacity and endurance. Conventional training was too slow, while the boosted gears boost and powerful skill consumption were massive. Obtaining Akino's magic through promotion was good, but it was dependent on others and uncontrollable. He opened the skill section of the system shop and filtered carefully. Soon, a skill caught his eye. Crimson Draw Special Growth Recovery Skill. Price: 50 points. Description: establishes a special energy extraction channel between the host and succubus contract servants. Core mechanisms. 1. Passive extraction. When the host engages in daily kissing with a contract servant, magic can be slowly and continuously obtained and stored. The storage limit is related to the skill level and the host's physical fitness. 2. Active extraction. The host can actively activate the skill to engage in deep kissing with a contract servant, efficiently converting and extracting a large amount of magic in a short time to quickly fill the reserve pool or use directly for combat consumption. Active extraction efficiency, speed, and single extraction amount are affected by skill level, the servant's magic level, and the intimacy between both parties. 3. Reserve pool. Stored magic can be called upon at any time. It is gentle in nature, highly compatible, and can quickly replenish consumption or be used to strengthen specific skills. The reserve pool has a limit and needs regular replenishment. This is the one. Shirakami Kaide's eyes lit up. This skill was practically tailor-made for his current situation. It not only solved the magic endurance problem but also perfectly combined daily interaction with strength growth, even further strengthening the bond with his servants. Although, the method was a bit heart-pounding. Purchase. 50 points deducted. Points remaining, 160. With the skill in hand, he immediately invested 5 skill points to raise it directly to LV5. Consumed 5 skill points, Crimson Draw LV1 right pointing arrow LV5. Effect significantly increased. Passive extraction efficiency improved, active extraction efficiency improved, total capacity of the magic reserve pool expanded. Shirakami Kaide thought about it and felt something was still missing, so his gaze turned toward another weakness, mobility. Although he had time stop and precognition, he lacked instantaneous displacement capability in large-scale battlefields or when needing to quickly move, pursue, or dodge. He quickly found his target. Space Jump Movement Skill. Price: 30 points. Description: consumes magical power to warp local space, achieving short-distance teleportation. Teleportation distance, precision, number of consecutive uses, and cooldown time are all directly related to the skill level and the amount of magical power consumed. Bought. 30 points deducted. Remaining points, 130. Similarly, he immediately used his last 1 skill point and purchased 4 more skill points costing 40 points to raise Space Jump directly to LV5. Remaining points, 90. Consuming 5 skill points, Space Jump LV1 right pointing arrow LV5. Effects significantly improved. Maximum teleportation distance highly increased depending on magical power consumption, jump precision significantly improved. Interval between consecutive uses greatly shortened. Added weak space perception, allowing vague perception of the target landing point's general condition, presence of obstacles, stability, etc. before initiating a jump. Magical power consumption efficiency optimized. After this series of operations, his points dropped from 310 to just 90. But he felt it was worth it. His strength had improved across the board, especially solving the 2 major shortcomings of magical power and mobility. 90 points left, keep 50 as a reserve for contract vouchers, and the remaining 40 can be for emergencies or buying other things later. Shirakami Kaide planned satisfactorily, his consciousness preparing to exit the system. Mr. Shirakami Kaide. A slightly displeased voice exploded in his ear like a thunderclap. Please answer this question. The math teacher's voice was like thunder, exploding in the quiet classroom. Shirakami Kaide jolted, his consciousness returning to reality. He stood up abruptly, looking at the string of complex symbols and diagrams on the blackboard, his mind a complete blank. He hadn't been listening at all just now. Many gazes in the classroom focused on him, some curious, some sympathetic, and some waiting to watch the show. Shirakami Kaide habitually rubbed the back of his head, revealing an awkward but polite smile, prepared to honestly admit he had been spacing out. However, as his gaze inadvertently swept over the adjacent seat, he noticed Asia, who had just transferred and was assigned to sit next to him, bowing her head. Her fair little hand held a pen, and on the edge of her own textbook, she was quickly and quietly writing down an answer. Then she carefully nudged the textbook toward him, her large eyes glancing at him nervously before quickly looking down again. Her small face was full of the urgency of, look quickly, and the kindness of wanting to help. A lifesaver. Shirakami Kaide was overjoyed. Without time to see if the numbers were perfectly clear, trusting the handwriting of a beautiful girl, he immediately looked up and said loudly, "Teacher, the answer is B." After speaking, he even gave a confident nod toward Asia to show his gratitude. The math teacher on the podium pushed up his glasses, looking at Shirakami Kaide expressionlessly. After 2 seconds of silence, he slowly spoke. Mr. Shirakami Kaide, unfortunately, you are wrong. The correct answer is C. Furthermore, you should listen attentively in class, don't look around, and definitely don't rely on the little hints from your neighbor, especially when that student herself doesn't seem very certain. PFF. Several uncontrollable chuckles rang out in the classroom. Shirakami Kaide's expression froze. He slowly turned his head to look at Asia, who looked like she wanted to find a hole in the ground to crawl into. Asia was stunned at first, then her small face turned bright red in an instant, all the way to her ears. She jerked her head down, almost burying her face in her textbook, her shoulders trembling slightly. Feeling his gaze, Asia looked up, her eyes turning slightly red, and mouthed a silent apology, sorry. I calculated it wrong too. Looking at the blonde nun's expression, mortified, on the verge of tears, and incredibly cute, the bit of embarrassment in Shirakami Kaide's heart vanished instantly. Instead, he felt like laughing. He shook his head at Asia, giving her a warm, "It's okay," smile, then frankly said to the teacher, "Sorry, teacher, I wasn't listening carefully. I'll pay attention." After sitting down, he quietly gave a thumbs up under the desk to Asia, who was still blaming herself, and whispered, "Thanks, Asia. Next time we'll work together to get it right." Asia was startled. Looking at his sincere smile, the flush on her face faded slightly. She couldn't help but break into a smile through her tears, nodding gently, a warm light rippling in her eyes. This small classroom interlude diluted the tension and bloodthirstiness of the past few days. The mundane school life, filled with a bit of awkwardness and warmth, quietly returned. The morning classes finally ended, and the bell rang. Shirakami Kaide had just finished packing his bag, preparing to head back to the clubroom with Yuto and Asia, when a commotion broke out at the classroom door. "Shirakami Kaide, are you here?" A familiar voice rang out. The entire class fell silent instantly, their gazes snapping toward the door. There stood Rias Grimori, the queen of Kuo Academy and the president of the Occult Research Club, looking elegant. She wasn't wearing her school blazer today, only her white shirt and short skirt, which outlined her breathtaking curves. Even more eye-catching was the exquisite multi-layered lacquered wooden bento box she held in her hand. President Shirakami Kaide was a bit surprised. With a faint, almost imperceptible blush on her face, Rias walked to his desk and gently set the bento box down. "This is for you. I made this bento myself. Consider it a celebration of your recovery, and, well, lunch." Whoa! The classroom exploded instantly. President Rias made a bento herself. For that transfer student. Am I dreaming? Countless gazes mixed with shock, envy, and jealousy shot toward Shirakami Kaide. Yuto shook his head with a smile on the side, while Asia widened her eyes in curiosity. Shirakami Kaide was also a bit dazed. Just as he was about to say thanks, another gentle, laughing voice chimed in. Era tilde president, you really beat me to it tilde. Himahima Akino had appeared at the door at some point. She was also carrying a beautiful bento bag as she walked over gracefully. Little by Shufeng, I was also very worried about your health tilde, so I specially prepared a nutritious lunch too tilde. Akino placed her bento bag next to Rias's box with a smile, deliberately leaning closer to Shirakami Kaide and winking. Try it and see if it suits your taste. A double critical hit. The classroom was now so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The way all the boys looked at Shirakami Kaide had upgraded from envy and jealousy to the level of, this guy is too terrifying, he must not be allowed to live. Rias frowned slightly and glanced at Akino. Akino, Shirakami Kaide's diet needs careful management. What I prepared is more suitable. Oh, President, you can't just eat one thing to recover. A change of flavor helps recovery more tilde. Akino didn't back down. Her smile remained gentle, but her eyes held a hint of provocation. Invisible electric sparks seemed to fill the air. Right in the middle of this tense standoff between the two giants, a timid voice spoke up from beside Shirakami Kaide. You Mr. Bai Shufeng. Asia, her face red, pulled two simple bento boxes from her own desk drawer and said softly. I also made a little, it's my first attempt, so it might not be as good as what Miss Rias and Miss Akino made, but I also wanted to thank Mr. Bai Shufeng for his help before. Whoosh. Rias and Akino's gazes both snapped toward Asia at the same time. Those gazes were no longer about competing with each other, but were mixed with surprise, scrutiny, and a subtle wariness of a new competitor. Asia felt her whole body tense under their gaze, and she instinctively shrank behind Shirakami Kaide like a startled little quail. She wasn't truly afraid of them, but she felt overwhelmed by this invisible, competitive pressure. Shirakami Kaide looked at the three tokens of affection laid out on the table, then at his nearly petrified classmates, and finally at the three beauties of different styles staring intently at him. He felt his scalp tingle, but deep down, he also felt strangely smug. He gave a dry cough, attempting to break the bizarre atmosphere. How about, we all eat together? At the clubroom. So, a few minutes later, such a scene appeared in the Occult Research Club. Shirakami Kaide sat in the main seat in the middle of the long table, with three open bento boxes lined up in front of him. On the left was a luxurious multi-layered Japanese meal prepared by Rias, beautifully plated and nutritionally balanced. On the right was an exquisite Western-style lunch made by Akino, cleverly paired and with an inviting aroma. Directly in front was a simple Japanese bento made by Asia. It looked plain, but one could see the heart put into it. Rias and Akino sat close to him on his left and right, while Asia stood somewhat uneasily across the table. All three girls held a pair of chopsticks in their hands, looking at him with burning gazes. Little by Shufeng, try my fried shrimp first tilde. Shirakami Kaide, try this tamagoyaki, the temperature should be just right. Please try this. I've been trying to make this Atsuyaki tamago for a long time. Three pairs of chopsticks reached out almost simultaneously, delivering different foods to his mouth. Shirakami Kaide. What could he do? He could only open his mouth and accept all comers. MMPH. MMPH. His cheeks puffed up at a visible speed, like a hamster. He chewed with difficulty, tasting three distinct flavors simultaneously while struggling to make the motions of chewing and swallowing. After finally swallowing a large mouthful, he quickly grabbed the water cup nearby and downed several gulps. Asia considerately refilled it for him. Phew. Shirakami Kaide let out a long breath and wiped away non-existent sweat. Under the gaze of three expectant pairs of eyes, he began the difficult task of judging. The president's Japanese meal uses top-tier ingredients, the heat is perfect, and the seasoning is elegant. I can see deep culinary skills and a precise grasp of nutrition. It's truly impressive. Senior Akino's Western meal is full of creativity, with rich layers of texture. The sauce preparation is especially brilliant, making it very appetizing. It's super delicious. Asia's bento, though simple, has a very warm taste. I can feel all the heart put into it. The Atsuyaki tamago is very tender. For a first attempt, this level shows great talent. He tried his best to balance things out, praising each one but focusing on different points. Hearing his evaluation, the corners of Rias's mouth curled up slightly. She gave a soft humph, but her eyes showed satisfaction. Akino covered her mouth and chuckled, a look of, "At least you know what to say," flashing in her eyes. Asia was the happiest of all, her small face lighting up as she lowered her head bashfully. Really? Thank you, Mr. Bai Shufeng. The tense atmosphere seemed to relax a bit. I've finished eating. I have something to discuss with Senior Kaneko, so I'll take my leave first. Asia didn't seem very comfortable in this subtle, group setting. Blushing, she quickly packed her empty bento box, bowed to the three of them, and jogged out of the clubroom. Akino also stood up elegantly, wiped the corners of her mouth with a napkin, and then suddenly leaned down, kissing Shirakami Kaide on the cheek, leaving behind a faint lip print and fragrance. Well then, I also have some things to handle little by Shufeng, remember to help me wash the bento box . She gave Rias a meaningful smile and also gracefully departed. In the clubroom, only Shirakami Kaide and Rias remained, along with the mess on the table. Shirakami Kaide leaned back against his chair, rubbing his visibly bloated stomach, and let out a long sigh. Was he happy? Certainly. Was he full? He was definitely stuffed. Rias leaned in gently, snuggling into his arms. She reached out with a finger and lightly wiped away the faint lip print Akino had left on his face. Shirakami Kaide, her voice was very soft, with a hint of satisfied laziness. Right now, it feels a bit surreal, but I'm very happy. Shirakami Kaide hugged her, smelling the fragrance in her hair. Me too, Rias. After a moment of silence, Rias's body stiffened slightly. Shirakami Kaide could feel that she had something on her mind. What's wrong? What are you thinking about? He asked. Rias hesitated, looking up at him with her purple eyes, which held some inner conflict. Shirakami Kaide thought for a moment and guessed, are you thinking about the engagement with the Phoenix family? A flash of shock crossed Rias's eyes. How did you know? Then it dawned on her. Was it my brother, or my father? They told you. Shirakami Kaide nodded, not hiding anything. When I went to the underworld last time, Lord Lucifer and the Duke spoke with me. Rias bit her lip. They actually told you about this, and put so much pressure on you. A bit of anger appeared on her face. And you've actually been keeping it from me. I couldn't exactly say, hey, your brother and dad asked me to woo you so you can get out of your engagement, the moment we met, could I? Shirakami Kaide smiled helplessly and lightly pinched her nose. Besides, they also said that while they provided options, the final choice is yours. If you're unwilling, or completely unsatisfied with me, they would find other ways to respect your decision. They weren't trying to force you, they just saw another possibility and hoped you could be happy. Hearing him say this, the anger in Rias's heart dissipated a bit. She knew her family meant well, but the method made her feel a bit awkward. Those two options. Rias's cheeks reddened, and her voice dropped lower. Especially the first one. I don't want to use that method. It feels like running away, and it's not respectful enough to you, or to myself. Shirakami Kaide held her hand and said seriously. I completely agree and respect your choice. That way might be direct, but it's not the right path. Our relationship shouldn't be built on that kind of calculation. Feeling his support and understanding, Rias's heart warmed, and she leaned in to kiss him on the cheek. But then, worry crept back onto her face. Then there's only one way left. She sighed. Defeating Riser Finex head-on in a rating game. But, his team of servants has been established for years and is very strong. A rating game isn't a solo fight, it's a team battle. Then we'll just win and show them. Shirakami Kaide interrupted her, his tone firm. For you, and for ourselves. We have you, Rias, Senior Akino, Yuto, Kaneko, and now Asia too. We are a team, and we will get stronger and stronger. There's still time before the engagement must be officially fulfilled, it's enough. Seeing the fighting spirit and confidence burning in his eyes, Rias was also inspired and nodded vigorously. However, Shirakami Kaide suddenly chuckled mischievously, leaning close to her ear. Since battle is inevitable, improving our strength is a matter of urgency. Right, President. Rias didn't fully understand his meaning yet and just nodded subconsciously. Yes, of course, we need to hurry and train. Before she could finish, Shirakami Kaide's face suddenly enlarged before her eyes, and his warm lips pressed directly against hers. MMPH. Rias's body stiffened, her eyes widening slightly, and her hand instinctively pressed against his chest in some resistance. But soon, that familiar, reassuring scent and the gentle touch on her lips caused her tense body to gradually relax. She remembered the intimate energy interaction when she was unconscious, the morning confession, the shyness in her heart slowly dissolved, replaced by a sweet palpitation. She closed her eyes, her long eyelashes trembling, and her hands changed from pushing away to wrapping around Shirakami Kaide's neck, beginning to respond to the kiss awkwardly but sincerely. The sunlight shone through the clubroom window, warmly bathing the two as they embraced and kissed. While feeling the gradually softening body and sweet response of the beauty in his arms, Shirakami Kaide quietly activated his newly acquired skill. Crimson Draw, Passive Mode, activated. Wisps of warm energy, carrying Rias's unique scent, quietly flowed into Shirakami Kaide's body through their closely pressed lips, merging into the newly opened, magic reserve pool. Though slow, it was indeed growing. This really is a good way to improve strength. Shirakami Kaide thought to himself, deepening the kiss. Rias, completely immersed in the emotional exchange, didn't notice the subtle flow of energy. She only instinctively felt that this kiss was exceptionally reassuring and comfortable, as if even her magic was faintly becoming more active. The clubroom was very quiet, with only the sound of their slightly hurried breathing intertwining. The two kissed as if the world were ending, kissing until the seas ran dry and the rocks crumbled. They no longer knew what heaven and earth were. Shirakami Kaide could no longer bring himself to care about how much magic power he had accumulated. When they pulled apart, both of their lips were somewhat moist. Under the sunlight streaming in through the window, a very thin silver thread could be seen connecting their lips, making the scene both enchanting and intimate. Shirakami Kaide's fingers gently stroked Rias's burning cheek. Seeing the hazy, watery light in her purple eyes, a strong sense of possessiveness and sweetness welled up in his heart. He lowered his voice, adding a hint of seduction as he whispered, Rias. I want to hear you call me, darling. Rias's face instantly turned even redder, like a ripe apple. Her eyes darted away for a moment, but under Shirakami Kaide's expectant and tender gaze, the shyness and reserve in her heart gradually melted away. She bit her lower lip as if she had made up her mind. Taking a deep breath, her lips parted slightly, and her voice was as thin as a mosquito's buzz. Darling. Just at the moment that final syllable was about to be uttered. Buzz. In the open space in the center of the club room, a complex magic circle lit up without warning. A silver-white light rapidly traced its shape, emitting stable and powerful spatial fluctuations. Shirakami Kaide and Rias were startled at the same time. Almost instinctively, they quickly separated, smoothing their clothes with a hint of panic. However, the lingering flush on their faces and their moist lips were hard to hide. As the light dissipated, a tall and slender figure appeared in the center of the magic circle. It was a woman with smooth, waist-length silver hair, meticulously combed into a neat hairstyle at the back of her head. Her features were as exquisite and perfect as a doll's, and her eyes were calm and rippleless. She wore a perfectly tailored classic black and white maid's dress. The collar, cuffs, and hem were adorned with simple lace and ribbons, accentuating her well-proportioned figure and upright posture. She radiated a calm, efficient, and unquestionable aura of power, along with a faint, almost imperceptible majesty that made one hesitate to look her in the eye. Graphia Lucifuge, the head maid of the Grimoire family, the queen of the demon king Lucifer, one of the underworld's recognized strongest servants, and the silver-haired annihilation queen. She clearly hadn't expected the teleportation landing point to be such a scene. The young lady Rias, with a flushed face, slightly swollen lips, and eyes still lingering with a bit of daze, was snuggled in a young man's arms. And that young man also had a suspicious blush on his face. Graphia's eyes swept over the two of them extremely quickly, showing no emotional fluctuations, as if she were merely confirming their status. Her face remained expressionless, only pausing for an imperceptible half-second. The air in the club room instantly froze into a deathly silence. Despite Rias's mental fortitude as the next head of the Grimoire family, she felt a strong wave of embarrassment and awkwardness at this moment. Shirakami Kaide's scalp felt numb, and he ranted inwardly, "What's the situation? Why did the head maid of the Demon King's house suddenly teleport to the club room? And at a time like this?" Ultimately, it was Graphia who broke the silence first. She coughed lightly, her voice cold and pleasant, with no hint of anything unusual. "Pardon the intrusion, Lady Rias. The teleportation coordinates are automatically located based on the magic beacon. I did not anticipate disturbing you." Rias quickly took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm down, and tried her best to restore her usual dignified expression. It's fine, Graphia. Did my brother send you?" "Yes." Graphia bowed slightly, her posture impeccable. "By the order of Lord Lucifer, I have come to deliver information and execute another command." More than 10 minutes later, Akino, Yuto, Kaneko, and the newly settled Asia, who had all received Rias's emergency contact, rushed back to the Occult Research Club. The atmosphere in the club room was somewhat serious. Graphia stood before everyone, still maintaining her business-like, calm, and efficient manner. First, regarding the follow-up investigation results of the previous attack. She began to state her report in a steady voice. The two fallen angels who escaped were intercepted and eliminated in the border region yesterday. It has been confirmed that their squad superiors belong to an independent radical faction, with little connection to higher-level system commands. Currently, the cleanup of the remnants and potential contacts of that faction is underway. Hearing this, there wasn't much joy on everyone's faces. Those two fallen angels were just pawns, their elimination was only a matter of time. As for the larger forces that may exist behind the fallen angels, and their potential connection with the mad priest Fried Selzen. Graphia continued, Lord Lucifer and the relevant departments have intervened in the investigation and political maneuvering. You do not need to be overly distracted by this, simply focus on your own duties and safety. This was expected. A contest at that level was indeed not something they could intervene in right now. However, Graphia's tone shifted as her azure eyes swept over the group. The whereabouts of Fried Selzen himself remain unknown. The spatial escape item he used was of a high grade, and he seems to have mastered a special technique for concealing his tracks. This person is dangerous and vengeful. Please remain vigilant. This was the most worrying news. An enemy hidden in the shadows, possessing significant strength and acting crazily, was more troublesome than a threat in the open. Rias had completely regained her calm posture as the president, and she nodded. Thank you for your hard work, Graphia. So, what is the other command my brother sent you with? Graphia's gaze slowly moved to Shirakami Kaide, who was sitting beside Rias. Her eyes were calm yet sharp, as if they could pierce through flesh and look directly at his essence. Lord Lucifer's other command is related to the primary purpose of my visit. Graphia's voice echoed clearly in the club room. I am to provide targeted guidance and training for Mr. Shirakami Kaide. Huh. Shirakami Kaide was just picking up his water glass to take a drink, and he almost choked upon hearing this. He had originally thought he was just an onlooker, but he didn't expect the spotlight to suddenly hit him. Everyone's eyes in the club room instantly focused on him, each with different expressions. Rias's worry and expectation, Akino's curiosity and amusement, Yuto's surprise and understanding, Kaniko's indifference, and Asia's bewilderment. Graphia seemed not to notice Shirakami Kaide's astonishment. Her tone remained flat, but the content of her words was merciless. Mr. Shirakami Kaide, Lord Lucifer and I have analyzed the combat records of your fight with the fallen angel Rainer in detail. It is undeniable that the decisiveness you showed in a desperate situation, your grasp of timing, and that peculiar energy mimicry and space-time manipulation ability are indeed impressive. With your strength base at the time, being able to achieve that level can be called an extraordinary performance. Hearing this, Shirakami Kaide breathed a slight sigh of relief. It seemed the Demon King and this head maid still acknowledged him, but Graphia's next words were like a bucket of ice water poured over his head. However, her words suddenly turned cold. This does not cover up the massive flaws and deficiencies you possess. Your combat techniques are crude, relying entirely on instinct and special abilities, and you lack systematic combat and tactical training. Your magic power utilization efficiency is low, the way you use the boost power is heavily wasteful, and your control over the physical load on your body is extremely poor. The development of your own abilities remains on the surface, your combined usage is stiff, and you lack continuity and subsequent variations. And the most important point. Graphia's gaze felt like a physical weight. You severely lack awareness of collaborative combat with a team. Your judgment of the timing to request a promotion was acceptable, but afterward, you fell completely into fighting alone, failing to form effective cooperation with Lady Rias or other members. A rating game is a team battle. With your current performance, if you want to defeat Riser Finex and his servant team, who have operated for many years with tacit cooperation. She paused, delivering the cruelest evaluation in the calmest tone. It is simply impossible. As the words fell, the temperature in the clubroom seemed to drop several degrees. The smile on Senior Akino's face faded slightly, Yuto frowned slightly, Kaniko put down her snacks, and even Asia could feel the heavy atmosphere. These words were spoken too heavily, too mercilessly. Although the other party had a special status and transcendent strength, such a direct denial still made people feel a wave of discomfort. Everyone's gaze focused on Shirakami Kaide again, with concern, encouragement, and curiosity about how he would react. Shirakami Kaide remained silent for a moment. The astonishment and initial embarrassment on his face slowly faded, replaced by a look of serious contemplation. He didn't get angry or try to defend himself because of the harsh, public criticism. Instead, he carefully reflected on Graphia's words. Then, he raised his head, met Graphia's cold and calm eyes, and nodded frankly. You're right, Miss Graphia. His voice was calm, even carrying a hint of sincerity. I do indeed have the issues you pointed out. Combat techniques, magic usage, and ability development are all my shortcomings. Besides that, he paused and continued, I also lack an awareness of my role within the team. I don't know how to better coordinate with Rias, Senior Akino, Yuto, and Kaniko to play the role of pawn piece should have in a team, rather than just acting as a powerful thug or surprise soldier. My combat experience is also severely lacking, and my strategies when facing different enemies are too singular. He not only accepted Graphia's criticism entirely but also analyzed his own deficiencies more deeply on that basis. Graphia looked at him, and a very faint, almost imperceptible ripple seemed to flash through her eyes, like surprise, or perhaps, a very slight hint of approval. Being able to clearly recognize your own shortcomings is the first step toward progress. Her tone remained flat. It seems you are not unteachable. She turned to Rias. Lady Rias, Lord Lucifer's intention is for me to conduct a period of intensive special training for Mr. Shirakami Kaide. At the same time, to better simulate the team environment of a raiding game and improve overall collaborative combat capabilities, this training requires you and all your servants to participate together. Rias immediately understood her brother's deep meaning. This was not just training Shirakami Kaide, but also tempering her entire team. She said solemnly, I understand. We will cooperate fully. Grafia nodded. Then, please prepare yourselves. In 2 days, I will come to take you to a dedicated training ground. During the training, it may be quite arduous, so please be mentally prepared. Her gaze finally landed on Shirakami Kaide. Mr. Shirakami Kaide, I hope you can prove that Lord Lucifer and I have not misjudged you. After saying this, she bowed slightly, the light of a teleportation circle lit up under her feet again, and her figure immediately disappeared from the clubroom. The members of the Occult Research Club were left looking at each other, with the pressure from that harsh evaluation still lingering in the air, along with a faint expectation and tension for the unknown training in 2 days. After Shirakami Kaide and Rias confirmed their feelings for each other, Shirakami Kaide naturally moved into Rias's villa. Since Rias was worried about letting Asia live alone, she simply had her move into the villa as well. In addition, Akino, as Rias's queen, and Shirakami Kaide's servant, also moved into the villa. In the dead of night, Rias's villa was immersed in peace. Shirakami Kaide lay on the bed in his guest room. Although his body was tired, his spirit was somewhat excited because of the day's events. Just as he was drowsily falling asleep, his ears keenly caught a very slight click, the sound of the doorknob being gently turned. His heart skipped a beat, and he immediately guessed who it was. Rias. Or Akino. He didn't open his eyes, slowed his breathing, and pretended to be fast asleep. The door was pushed open silently and then closed gently. An almost inaudible sound of footsteps approached the bedside, bringing with it a familiar, pleasant fragrance. Then, he felt the corner of his blanket being gently lifted, and a gust of cool air entered, but it was quickly replaced by a warm, soft body carrying a feminine scent. That body slipped nimbly into the covers, pressing tightly against him. He could feel the soft fabric rubbing against his skin. Then, a warm, moist touch began to wander vaguely over his neck and collarbone, like a feather's light stroke, bringing waves of tingling. Finally, that soft warmth landed on his lips, touching tentatively at first, then gradually deepening. Shirakami Kaide could finally hold back no longer. He suddenly reached out both arms, pulling that warm, fragrant body tightly into his embrace and responding passionately to the kiss. When their lips parted, he chuckled in the darkness, speaking in a teasing tone. Senior Akino, night raiding isn't a good habit, you know. Aren't you afraid the president will find out and settle the score with you? He guessed it was Akino because although Rias had become more proactive, given her pride, the possibility of her sneaking into his room in the middle of the night, well, it was relatively lower. Era tilde I've been found out tilde. Sure enough, Akino's smiling, slightly husky voice sounded in his ear, her warm breath brushing against his earlobe. I'm not afraid tilde and besides, aren't you enjoying it too, little Bai Shufeng? With the help of the faint moonlight filtering through the window, Shirakami Kaide finally saw the attire of the person in his arms. She was actually wearing only a set of extremely romantic black lace lingerie. The thin fabric could barely cover her proud fullness and perky curves, and large patches of snow-white skin glowed with an alluring luster in the dark. What was even more lethal was that her long, straight legs were wrapped in smooth black stockings that extended all the way to her thighs, shimmering with a delicate light under the moon, the touch so wonderful it made one's heart flutter. Noticing his gaze, Akino didn't hide. Instead, she adjusted her posture to make her beautiful curves stand out even more. She took Shirakami Kaide's hand and placed it gently on her flat abdomen, where a pink-purple succubus crest emitted a faint, warm glow in the darkness. Here, for some reason, it feels a bit itchy. Akino's voice carried a hint of lazy seduction. Little Bai Shufeng, what do you think is going on? Shirakami Kaide immediately felt a rush of blood to his head. This hint was beyond obvious. His breathing grew heavy as he flipped over, pinning Akino beneath him. His hands braced on either side of her body as he looked down at the cunning and passion flickering in her eyes, his voice somewhat raspy. Maybe the contract needs some energy maintenance. Let me help you check it thoroughly. He lowered his head, about to kiss those alluring red lips again. Click. Another extremely slight sound of a doorknob turning. Shirakami Kaide's movements froze instantly. A flash of surprise also crossed Akino's eyes, but then a knowing and playful smile appeared on her face. Shirakami Kaide reacted extremely quickly, pulling the blanket over them and covering both of them tightly, even their heads. Inside the covers was pitch black, with only their intertwined breathing and heartbeats remaining. Slight footsteps approached the bedside and paused. Then, Shirakami Kaide felt the mattress on the other side sink slightly, the blanket was lifted at a corner again, and another body with a different fragrance, equally soft but seemingly a bit tense, slipped in as well. In the dark, warm, and crowded bed, three pairs of eyes looked at each other at point-blank range. Through the extremely faint light filtering through the gaps in the blanket, Shirakami Kaide could see Akino's face on the left with a mischievous smile. On the right, was Rias's exquisite face, which, despite her best efforts to remain calm, was flushed all the way to her neck, her eyes filled with shame, embarrassment, and a hint of panic. Silence. A suffocating silence. Akino was the first to break the deadlock. She even deliberately leaned closer into Shirakami Kaide's embrace, almost nibbling on his earlobe as she whispered in a breathy voice. That warm breath and the content of her words sent a jolt through Shirakami Kaide's entire body. It seems, the president is also suffering from insomnia. Rias was too ashamed to speak, only able to glare fiercely at Akino. Then, as if simply giving up on appearances, she also squeezed toward Shirakami Kaide's side, reaching out and wrapping her arms around his waist with a hint of spite. Shirakami Kaide. Happiness had come too suddenly, and it was far too heavy. He didn't dare move a muscle. Beneath the ultimate experience of having a beauty in each arm was a sense of crisis, fearing he'd be torn to pieces by the two high-class devils in the next second. The night passed in an extremely subtle, ambiguous, tense, and stimulating atmosphere. The temperature under the covers was frighteningly high. The next morning, Shirakami Kaide woke up to a slight sensation of suffocation. Dazed, he reached out and grabbed something from his face. Taking it down to look, it was a soft piece of women's underwear with a faint, elegant fragrance. Judging by the style and size, it belonged to Rias. He blinked, fully awake now, only to find himself in a blissful predicament. His left arm was held tightly in Akino's embrace, buried deep within that startling softness, and was almost numb. His right arm was pillowed under Rias's neck, similarly unable to move. And on his body, a long, beautiful leg wrapped in torn black silk was draped over the left side, while a smooth, fair, jade-like leg pressed down on the right. The three of them were entangled in an extremely intimate, messy, and lazy posture. The thin blanket barely covered the vital areas, exposing large patches of snow-white skin and the traces of last night's madness to the morning light. Shirakami Kaide held his breath, carefully and bit by bit extracting his numb arms from the two goddesses' grip. Despite his light movements, he still disturbed them. Rias and Akino let out soft moans almost simultaneously, their long eyelashes fluttering as they slowly opened their eyes. The morning haze was quickly replaced by clarity. Rias saw Shirakami Kaide's face right in front of her, then felt her nearly naked state and the soreness in certain parts of her body. The blushing memories of last night instantly came flooding back. She let out a soft, ah, and suddenly pulled up the quilt to wrap herself tightly, leaving only a beet red face and messy crimson hair exposed. Akino appeared much more composed. She stretched lazily, her beautiful curves fully on display, and even deliberately rubbed Shirakami Kaide's calf with her toes, a satisfied and playful smile on her face. Good morning, little Bai Shufeng tilde did you rest well last night? Shirakami Kaide coughed twice, looked at the clock on the wall, and hurriedly said, tea time to get up. We're going to be late. After a flurry of activity, the three were finally dressed and walked out of the bedroom. In the living room downstairs, Asia had already prepared breakfast along with the villa's maids. Seeing the three of them come down from upstairs together, Asia explained somewhat shyly. I saw it was about time, so I thought I'd help prepare breakfast. I hope I didn't disturb your rest. Looking at Asia's pure, kind, and untainted azure eyes, and then thinking about the absurdity of their night and their embarrassment this morning, Shirakami Kaide, Rias, and Akino all felt a complex mix of shame and relief. Fortunately, Asia didn't know anything. Thank you, Asia, that's a big help. Rias tried her best to maintain her presidential dignity, though the tips of her ears were still slightly red. Kuo Academy, Occult Research Club. All members were present. The atmosphere was a bit more subtle than usual, especially between Rias and Akino. The occasional glances they exchanged seemed to carry a meaning only they understood. Meanwhile, Shirakami Kaide felt that Kaniko's gaze toward him seemed even colder. But the fact that her favorability hadn't dropped made him breathe a sigh of relief. Rias cleared her throat, pulling everyone's attention back to business. Before officially beginning the special training with Graphia, there is one more thing that needs to be done. She looked at Shirakami Kaide and Asia. Shirakami Kaide, Asia, as newly joined servants, you have not yet contracted your own familiars. Familiars? Asia asked curiously. Yes, Yuto explained gently. Familiars are assistants to devils, usually magical beasts or specific magical creatures. They can help handle chores, scout, deliver messages, and even provide support in battle. Every devil, especially servants of high-class devils who have territories and duties, usually contracts at least one familiar. Akinos and my familiars mainly handle information transmission and chores for the family territory. Rias continued, Kaniko's familiar is quite special. Kaniko nodded expressionlessly. A palm-sized object on her shoulder that looked like a black cat plushie moved, that was her familiar. As for Yuto, he doesn't have a contracted familiar for the time being, focusing more on swordsmanship. Rias went on, Shirakami Kaide, Asia, you need your own familiars. This is not just for convenience, but also to deal with various future situations. In raiding games, the use of familiars is also a field of study. She stood up. After school today, I will take you to a place where you can come into contact with various candidates suitable for contracting as familiars. You can choose according to your feelings and needs. Shirakami Kaide and Asia looked at each other, both seeing curiosity and anticipation in the other's eyes. A familiar. He wondered what kind of fellow he would meet. After school, Rias took all the members of the Occult Research Club through a magic circle to a place in the underworld known as the Familiar Forest. Towering ancient trees stood here, the air thick with dense magic power, and various strange creatures could be faintly seen among the woods. Many creatures suitable for becoming familiars live here. Rias explained as they walked. Everything from lower-class devils and elemental spirits to magical beasts. Contracting a familiar requires a two-way choice, feeling the compatibility of each other's magic power wavelengths. Wow! Asia looked around curiously, her eyes full of wonder. Shirakami Kaide also perked up, starting to calculate what kind of cool familiar he should find. After walking for a while, they came to a lakeside shrouded in mist within the forest. Rias stopped and said, "This lake is the habitat of water spirits. Shirakami Kaide, you can try starting from here. The water spirit Undine is a quite good choice for a familiar, specializing in support and healing. Undine. The graceful figure of the legendary water nymph immediately appeared in Shirakami Kaide's mind. Silky long hair, transparent gossamer clothes, a personality as gentle as water. Perfect. But he seemed to have forgotten some key information. It's the one. Shirakami Kaide walked to the lakeside eagerly, concentrating his mind to release his magic power fluctuations into the lake, silently chanting in his heart. Gentle and beautiful water spirit big sister, come out quickly. Ripples appeared on the lake surface. Under everyone's expectant gazes, a figure slowly rose from the water. Then Shirakami Kaide's expression froze. The one that appeared from the lake was indeed an Undine. But it was over 2 meters tall, covered in exaggerated granite-like muscle blocks, with water sliding down its bronze skin and an honest smile on its rugged face. Yo! Young man, are you the one who summoned me? The muscular Undine spoke with a booming voice and patted its solid chest muscles. I'm strong, I can tank and fight, and I can even give hydrotherapy. Want a contract? His illusions shattered, Shirakami Kaide froze in place, his mouth twitching. Beside him, Akino couldn't help but giggle behind her hand, and even Kaneko turned her face away, her shoulders trembling slightly. Holy crap. That. I'll look at some others. Shirakami Kaide's mouth twitched as he quickly backed away with a dry laugh. Just as he was reeling from the shock, a Puji sound suddenly came from the nearby bushes. A translucent, jelly-like, basketball-sized blue creature hopped out. It was a slime. This wasn't anything unusual, but this slime's behavior was very strange. As soon as it appeared, it headed straight for Rias, who was closest to it, jumping toward her skirt at high speed, its translucent body about to stick to it. Rias frowned, about to raise her hand to vaporize it with magic. Wait! Shirakami Kaide shouted as if possessed, stepping forward in an instant to grab the slime. It felt cool and bouncy, like holding a large piece of jelly. The slime squirmed in his hands, seemingly uninterested in him, still persistently trying to hop toward the women. You little thing, you're quite the lecher, aren't you? Shirakami Kaide didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but his heart stirred. Although slimes were low-level, their potential was versatile, and, it seemed to have a subtle compatibility with a certain, broad interest, trait of his. Most importantly, at first sight, the succubus bloodline in his body seemed to resonate, as if this seemingly low-level slime creature was not simple. To put it simply, he felt that this slime really understood him. President, this little guy, seems quite interesting. Shirakami Kaide squeezed the slime. How about I try to form a contract with it? Rias looked at the slime still struggling toward her and Akino, then at Shirakami Kaide, and sighed helplessly. As you wish. But a low-level familiar like this probably won't be of much help. It's fine, I can just keep it as a pet. Shirakami Kaide was optimistic. He tried to output magic to the slime to establish a connection. The process was unexpectedly smooth, the slime quickly calmed down, stopped hopping around, and a faint glow representing the contract's formation appeared on its surface. Shirakami Kaide felt a vague connection established between himself and this lump of jelly. I'll call you Jelly from now on. Shirakami Kaide patted it. Jelly quivered, which served as a response. However, the moment the contract was completed and Shirakami Kaide let his guard down slightly, the jelly he had placed on the ground suddenly erupted. It wasn't attacking, but its body rapidly expanded and changed color from blue to a murky dark yellow. Then it suddenly sprayed a large amount of thick, pungent-smelling acidic liquid from its surface. Like a rainstorm, the liquid drenched Rias, Akino, Kaneko, and Asia, who were standing closest. What? Kya? It happened so suddenly that no one expected the newly contracted familiar to pull such a stunt. Caught off guard, the 4 women were drenched by the acid. Then, a shocking scene occurred. The acidic slime seemed to be extremely corrosive, but unlike normal corrosion, it only targeted clothing fibers. With a faint sizzle, the school uniforms, shirts, and skirts on the four women dissolved and melted away the moment they touched the slime, like snow under the sun. Almost at the same time, Kiba Yuto, standing slightly behind them, suddenly felt his vision go dark, as if an indescribable invisible hand had covered his eyes, instantly blinding him. Meanwhile, Shirakami Kaide, the only one unaffected and spared, stared with eyes wide open, his nose heating up as he nearly sprayed blood on the spot. Rias's long red hair clung somewhat messily to her smooth shoulders. She was wearing an extremely exquisite and romantic set of black lace lingerie, perfectly supporting her proud fullness, while her slender waist and flat belly were fully exposed. The edges of her black lace panties were adorned with tiny bows. Her face was first shocked, then turned a deep red with extreme embarrassment and anger. She instinctively wrapped her arms around her chest, glaring through gritted teeth at the lump of jelly on the ground, as power of destruction began to dance at her fingertips. Akino was wearing a set of deep purple erotic lingerie with a bold design. The translucent lace could barely cover the key scenery. Slender straps hung over her rounded shoulders, creating a sharp contrast with her snow-white skin, which the purple lingerie complemented even further. Unlike Rias's embarrassment and anger, after her initial shock, a strange blush and a playful smile appeared on Akino's face. She even intentionally puffed out her chest slightly, looking at Shirakami Kaide with a mischievous gaze. Era tilde little by Shufeng, you're familiar. They really know how to give gifts. Grand Giftwoolen cloth tilde. On Kaniko's petite body was a set of light pink cotton underwear with cartoon cat paw prints, a conservative but cute style. The silver-haired girl was expressionless now, her eyes fixed on the slime, emitting a tangible low-pressure aura and killing intent. Her fists were clenched, clearly considering whether to smash this thing flat or burn it to ash. Asia, the blonde nun, was wearing the simplest, pure white cotton underwear, carrying a sense of maidenly purity, but now it was almost soaked and clinging to her body, outlining her youthful yet moving curves. She was completely frozen, her eyes full of bewilderment and shame, her face so red it looked like it could drip blood. Her hands moved frantically to cover herself, but she didn't know where to start, and an unconscious whimper like a small animal escaped her mouth. Time seemed to stand still for 2 seconds. Gel. Li. Fooling well done. Shirakami Kaide's roar broke the silence. He swallowed the second half of his sentence and put on a show of extreme anger. He lunged forward and pinned down the slime, which was still squirming and seemed very satisfied with its results. Yet, his eyes found it difficult to look away from the scenery before him. You better behave yourself. Obliterate it. Rias's embarrassed and angry voice rang out, red light gathering at her fingertips. Wait. President, have mercy. Shirakami Kaide quickly stuffed jelly behind him. It just formed the contract, it doesn't know any better. I'll definitely discipline it properly when we get back. Humph. Rias glared fiercely at him, then at the lump of slime, and finally dissipated her magic. She quickly used magic to clean off the remaining slime on her body and condensed a temporary crimson magic cloak to cover herself. Akino, Kaniko, and Asia also used magic or demonic power to handle their predicament. At that moment, Yuto's vision returned, and he blinked blankly. What just happened? Why did I suddenly lose my sight? No one answered him. The atmosphere on the scene remained awkward and subtle. Let's keep moving. Rias took a deep breath, trying to maintain her dignity as the president, but the blush on her face wouldn't fade for a while. After that interlude, the group continued deeper into the forest. Shirakami Kaide stuffed the now docile jelly into his backpack, feeling immense pressure as he endured the varying degrees of stares from the 4 women along the way. A moment later, as they reached a clearing in the forest, another anomaly occurred. The sky suddenly darkened, accompanied by the crackling sound of electricity. A juvenile sprite dragon, covered in bluish-green scales and only the size of a small dog with a pair of small fleshy wings on its back, descended from the sky. It looked very nervous, and as soon as it landed, it spat a small bolt of electricity at Shirakami Kaide, who was closest to it. Again, Shirakami Kaide quickly dodged, but the backpack behind him took the hit, and the jelly inside let out a series of jigu protests. However, this little dragon seemed to have no interest in either Shirakami Kaide or the slime. Its gaze quickly locked onto Asia in the crowd. It tilted its head, its golden dragon pupils curiously sizing up Asia, as the hostility and tension on its body gradually faded. It moved carefully, step by step, to Asia's feet, gently nuzzling her calf with its head and letting out a faint, wooloo sound. Ah! Asia was a bit scared, but more than that, she was amazed. She could feel that this little dragon meant no harm. Instead, there was a natural sense of closeness. She crouched down and tentatively reached out her hand. The little dragon immediately nuzzled her palm affectionately. At that moment, Zato, a giant owl familiar responsible for guidance and appraisal, flew over from out of nowhere and spoke. A sprite dragon, a rare and proud creature. It has actively chosen this nun, and their magic wavelengths are perfectly compatible. A contract can be formed. Asia looked at Rias in pleasant surprise. Rias nodded. Asia, it has chosen you. Concentrate and establish a connection with it. Asia did as told, transmitting her gentle magic and healing aura. The little dragon let out a cheerful low cry and actively accepted the contract, transforming into a bluish-green light that merged into Asia's body. Then, a miniature phantom of the dragon appeared on Asia's shoulder, affectionately nuzzling her cheek. It worked. Asia was overjoyed. I'll give you a name. How about Blue Star? Like a blue star. Blue Star let out a cheerful cry, clearly liking the name. Watching Asia and her newly acquired cute familiar, everyone broke into a smile. Shirakami Kaide was also happy for her, then compared her dragon to the blob of jelly in his backpack that had just caused a dissolution crisis. Well, a dragon was just okay, he supposed. The trip to the familiar forest ended in such a safe yet surprise-filled atmosphere. The light of the magic circle returning from the familiar forest faded within the occult research club room. Shirakami Kaide was still immersed in the complex emotions of the embarrassment caused by the jelly and the relief of Asia's successful acquisition of the sprite dragon, when his footsteps suddenly halted. The atmosphere in the clubroom was wrong. It wasn't empty. On the contrary, someone was sitting grandly in the club president's seat that belonged to Rias. It was a young man with short crimson hair, handsome but with a clear air of frivolity and arrogance between his brows. He wore sophisticated noble attire, legs crossed, leaning back lazily in the chair with a cup of black tea in his hand, sipping it slowly as if he were the master of the place. Standing quietly by his side was a tall young woman wearing a form-fitting kipao, with a beautiful but expressionless face. Her hands were folded in front of her, and her aura was steady, clearly his servant or attendant. Riser Phoenix, the third son of the Phoenix family and Rias's nominal fiancé. Rias's expression instantly darkened, as if covered by a layer of frost. The gentle smile on Akino's face faded, her eyes turning sharp. Yuto and Kaneko also immediately entered a state of alert. Asia hid somewhat uneasily behind Shirakami Kaide, and Blue Star let out a wary low growl on her shoulder. Yo, Rias, you're back. Riser acted as if he had just seen them, setting down his teacup with an unpleasant, self-righteous smile on his face. I've been waiting for you for a while. Your place is decorated quite well, but the tea and snacks are just mediocre. He completely ignored everyone else, his gaze landing only on Rias with an undisguised look of scrutiny and possessiveness. Riser Phoenix. Rias's voice was cold, carrying suppressed anger. Who allowed you to enter my clubroom and sit in my seat? Oh, don't be so distant, my fiancé. Riser spread his hands, his tone flippant. We'll be one family sooner or later, isn't what's yours mine. I came this time because I heard you took in a somewhat interesting new servant and made quite a stir, so I came to take a look. By the way, his gaze finally swept over the group beside Rias, lingering for a moment longer on Shirakami Kaide with undisguised contempt. Just to remind you, the wedding date is approaching. You should start curbing some unnecessary social interactions. The marriage between our Phoenix family and your Grimoire family is to consolidate power and produce excellent offspring, not for you to play house in the human world. These words were full of high and mighty arrogance and insults toward Rias and her servants. Take back your words, Phoenix. Rias took a step forward, the magic of destruction beginning to swirl around her. My servants, my clubroom, and my life are none of your business. As for the engagement, she took a deep breath, as if she had made a certain decision, and her eyes became even more determined. Under everyone's surprised gazes, Rias suddenly reached out and actively took Shirakami Kaide's arm, leaning her body intimately against him. Then, she turned to Riser and said in a clear and powerful voice. There's something I think you need to know. Between me and Shirakami Kaide, it's already more than just a relationship between a king and a servant. With that, she stood on her tiptoes and, in front of everyone, actively kissed Shirakami Kaide's lips. The kiss was brief but firm, full of the intent to declare her sovereignty. After their lips parted, Rias's face was flushed, but her eyes met Riser's without flinching. So, I hope you understand that some things are impossible. I will formally raise an objection to the family regarding the engagement. The clubroom fell into a dead silence. The frivolous smile on Riser's face instantly froze. He stared fixedly at Rias, then at the innocent-looking Shirakami Kaide, who seemed to still be savoring that kiss. The arrogance in his eyes was rapidly replaced by shock and disbelief, finally turning into a raging fire of anger and a nearly twisted jealousy. What did you say? Riser's voice rose sharply, carrying a hint of exasperated shrillness. You actually with this lowly lower-class devil servant. He suddenly stood up from his seat, and scorching fire attribute magic began to leak out around him, the room's temperature rising instantly. Rias Grimoire. Do you know what you're doing? This is a betrayal of the alliance between our two families. It's an insult to my Phoenix family. Riser's face was somewhat distorted by rage. I'm telling you, because of this, I can't give up even more. As long as the engagement exists, you are my fiancé. This is something both families and the Devil King have approved. You can't escape. His gaze was pinned on Shirakami Kaide like a venomous snake, his tone becoming spiteful and pathological. Good. Very good. A lowly devil who doesn't know the heights of the heavens and dares to touch my woman. I'll remember this. On the day Rias and I get married, I'll take special care of you. I'll have you stand closest to the altar, to see with your own eyes how your king becomes my wife. I want you to remember that you will always be just a lowly servant, only fit to look up from below. These malicious and arrogant remarks caused anger to surface in the eyes of Akino and the others. Rias was trembling even more with rage, her power of destruction almost becoming uncontrollable. Shirakami Kaide gently patted the back of Rias's hand to comfort her, then took a step forward, facing Riser's gaze that seemed ready to spit fire. He reached out and, under the astonished gazes of Riser and everyone else, pulled Rias into his arms with a natural and possessive motion. Rias stiffened slightly at first, then obediently leaned into his chest, her cheeks flushing red. Then, Shirakami Kaide looked at Riser and, in a voice so clear that everyone in the clubroom could hear, said word by word. Sorry, the Phoenix families, roasted chicken prince. He paused intentionally, as if deliberating over his choice of words. I'm afraid we won't be inviting you when Rias and I get married in the future. Because. A corner of Shirakami Kaide's mouth curled into an incredibly punchable yet innocent and harmless smile. I don't really like the smell of roasted chicken, it's too rank, and I'm afraid it would ruin the guest's appetite. A deathly silence fell. Everyone was stunned, including Rias, who was being held in Shirakami Kaide's arms. Her mind even went blank for a moment. Shirakami Kaide's words, "When Rias and I get married in the future," echoed repeatedly in her head. Akino was the first to react, unable to stop herself from letting out a pfft of laughter before quickly covering her mouth, though her shoulders were shaking violently. Kaneko turned her face away, but the corner of her mouth seemed to twitch. Yuto had a strange expression, struggling to hold back his laughter. Asia looked bewildered, seemingly not yet fully understanding the lethality of those words. As for Riser Phoenix, his face, which was already flushed with anger, instantly turned pale, then shifted from blue to purple, and finally settled into a hideous dark crimson. The scorching magic power that had been merely leaking from him now erupted like a volcano. Crimson flames flared up uncontrollably, scorching and distorting the air around him. The cup of black tea he had just been drinking, along with a corner of the table, vaporized instantly. You fooled low-class mongrel. I will burn you to ashes. Riser completely lost his mind, roaring as he condensed a violently burning, terrifyingly hot destructive fireball in his right hand, about to hurl it at Shirakami Kaide. The Cheongsam-clad maid beside him narrowed her eyes, seemingly wanting to intervene, but it was already too late. At the same time, Shirakami Kaide's gaze turned cold, and a crimson light flashed on his left arm. The hideous crimson gauntlet instantly covered his left arm, and the central jewel glowed with intense red light. Boost! 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 The low and majestic sound of boost echoed continuously from the gauntlet, each sound accompanied by a surge in Shirakami Kaide's aura. The violent dragon's pressure, mixed with the magic power accumulated through his interactions with Rias and Akino, pushed back against Riser's fiery pressure without showing any weakness. The magic powers of both sides clashed violently, making the air in the clubroom feel as if it were about to solidify and explode. The more fragile glassware had already begun to crack. A major battle was on the verge of breaking out. At this critical, almost irreversible moment. Buzz! Another teleportation circle lit up in the center of the clubroom, in the open space between the two sides. This magic circle was even more complex, emitting silver-white, stable, and powerful fluctuations of magic power that instantly suppressed the violently clashing magic fields. The light faded. Graphia Lucifuge, with silver hair reaching her waist and wearing a black and white maid dress, appeared there expressionlessly. She calmly scanned the two sides at each other's throats, as if the conflict capable of destroying the entire clubroom was merely child's play. That's enough. Her voice wasn't loud, yet it carried an authority that reached everyone's ears clearly. Riser's fury seemed to have a bucket of ice water poured over it. The fireball in his hand flickered, not thrown immediately but not dissipated either, as he just stared intently at Graphia. Graphia. You saw it. This lowly servant dared to insult my Phoenix family like this. Enrias, she. Lord Phoenix, Graphia interrupted him, her tone remaining steady and emotionless. You trespassed into Lady Rias's private clubroom in the human world without permission and were the first to release magic pressure as a provocation. This is already a breach of etiquette. Lord Lucifer is already aware of the situation here. Hearing the name, Lord Lucifer, Riser's pupils constricted slightly, and the anger on his face was forcibly suppressed a bit, though he remained unwilling. Graphia stopped looking at him and turned toward Shirakami Kaide and Rias. Her gaze lingered for a moment on the boosted gear on Shirakami Kaide's left arm, then she bowed slightly to Rias. Lady Rias, Lord Lucifer has asked me to remind you and Lord Phoenix, the engagement is a family agreement, and any disputes should be resolved within the rules. Private conflicts are unseemly and are not the way to a solution. Her words pointed out the key. The final stage for resolving the engagement dispute would be a rating game. Riser gave a heavy snort and finally dissipated the fireball in his hand, though his eyes still glared malevolently at Shirakami Kaide. Fine. Very well. Graphia, since you say so, I'll follow the rules. He turned to Rias and said through gritted teeth. Rias Grimoire. I will formally propose a rating game. Very soon. I will defeat you and this reckless low-class servant fairly and squarely in front of everyone. When that time comes, I'll see what else you have to say. You will fulfill the engagement whether you want or not. After saying that, he gave Shirakami Kaide another fierce glare, as if wanting to skin him alive, then waved his hand at the cheongsam-clad maid beside him. Let's go. The two stepped into the glowing teleportation circle and disappeared. The suffocating pressure in the clubroom dissipated with Riser's departure, but the heavy atmosphere remained. Grafia looked at Rias and Shirakami Kaide, her voice softening slightly. Lady Rias, Mr. Shirakami Kaide. After Lord Phoenix proposes the rating game, the relevant procedures will formally begin. Before then, her gaze fell on Shirakami Kaide. For tomorrow's special training, please be sure to give your all. Your strength will directly determine the outcome of the game, as well as the future. She bowed slightly, and the teleportation circle beneath her feet lit up again. Tomorrow morning, I will come to pick you all up on time. With a flash of silver light, Grafia also left. Only the members of the Occult Research Club remained in the room. After a brief silence, Rias gently pulled away from Shirakami Kaide's embrace. The blush on her face hadn't faded, but her gaze had regained the calmness and determination of a president. She looked at Shirakami Kaide and said softly, "You were too reckless just now." Shirakami Kaide deactivated the gauntlet and grinned. "I couldn't just watch that roasted chicken act all smug in front of you, could I? Besides, you've already gone all out." He was referring to how Rias originally hadn't wanted to use an excuse like, the two of them having made substantial progress, to make Riser back off and avoid the rating game. However, unexpectedly, it had the opposite effect. But thinking about it, that excuse was flimsy to begin with. After all, Rias was still nominally Riser's fiancé, and who could accept their fiancé getting involved with another devil during their engagement? No devil could tolerate that. Then he looked at Rias, his eyes serious. "I'm telling the truth." Rias's face flushed, and she turned her head away, but the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. However, Akino walked over, her tone carrying a hint of worry. This has completely enraged Riser. He will definitely propose to hold the rating game as soon as possible. Our time is even tighter now. Then let's seize every minute and every second. Yuto gripped the hilt of the sword at his waist, his eyes sharp. Training. Kaneko said concisely. I will work hard too. Asia said, gathering her courage. Looking at her servants, a warm current and a strong fighting spirit surged in Rias's heart. Thank you, everyone. Riser Phoenix's actions were faster than expected. Less than half a day after Grafia left, a formal document co-signed in the name of the Phoenix family and Riser Phoenix personally was delivered to Rias through channels dedicated to devils. The content of the document was concise and arrogant. In view of the current situation, in order to properly resolve the differences in the marriage matter between the Grimoire and Phoenix families, Riser Phoenix formally submitted an application for a rating game to Rias Grimoire. The match time was set for 7 days later. The location was the official rating game venue designated by the underworld. In 1 week, Rias put down the document, her fingertips pressing slightly, causing scorch marks to appear on the edges of the paper. The time pressure was suffocating. The atmosphere in the clubroom was heavy. Although they had anticipated it, the other party's impatience, giving only 1 week for preparation, revealed their aggressive mindset and desire for a quick resolution. It seems that, roasted chicken, young master is driven mad by anger, and also fears that delays will bring trouble, Akino said softly, but there was no smile in her eyes. 1 week, time is too tight. Yuto's brow was furrowed. HMPH. Kaneko only snorted, but her clenched fist showed she wasn't relaxed. Asia nervously held Blue Star in her arms, The little sprite dragon seemed to feel its owner's unease and gently rubbed against her cheek. Shirakami Kaide clapped his hands to draw everyone's attention. All right, being nervous won't help. Since we only have 1 week, we can't waste a single minute. Graphia's special training tomorrow is our beginning. Now, adjust your state and prepare to welcome hell. His words dispelled some of the gloom. Everyone nodded and went to make their final preparations. The next morning, when Graphia appeared on time in the clubroom to open the teleportation, Shirakami Kaide and the others still felt a hint of expectation. With the legendary, silver-haired Annihilation Queen, personally guiding them, the training location would surely be some legendary dangerous land in the underworld, or a secret cultivation field filled with high-difficulty magic circles, right? However, after the light of the teleportation array faded, the scene before them left them slightly stunned. Fresh air, verdant mountains and forests, with the sound of birds chirping and the faint sound of flowing water in the distance. They stood on a hillside with soft grass beneath their feet, looking out over rolling hills and dense forests. The environment was beautiful. But no matter how they looked at it, it seemed more like a place suitable for an outing, hiking, or ordinary physical training, rather than the bloodthirsty secret cultivation realm they had imagined. Miss Graphia, is this the training ground? Shirakami Kaide couldn't help but ask. Graphia looked at them calmly, as if seeing through their thoughts. Cultivation is in the heart, not the form. This place is far from human towns, the magic environment is suitable, the space is open, and there are natural barriers. For your current stage of team adaptability training and individual ability assessment, it is sufficient. An environment that is too special or dangerous would instead easily interfere with your understanding of your own foundations. Well, the big shot was right. Everyone composed their minds. Since they were here, they might as well make the best of it. In a relatively flat forest clearing, everyone sat in a circle. Graphia didn't waste time and went straight to the point. First, identify your opponent. Magic condensed in her hand, manifesting several clear images and data panels. Riser Phoenix, the third son of the Phoenix family. His rank is King, and he possesses the core characteristics of a phoenix, granting him an immortal body. His servant team is fully configured and experienced. Since he obtained his pieces, he has participated in 11 rating games. Among them, he has 8 wins, all achieved by relying on Riser's immortality and excellent command. Almost every match was a 0 casualty victory. 2 losses, not because he was defeated due to insufficient strength, but 2 matches he intentionally lost out of goodwill because the opponents were devil families closely related to the Phoenix family. 1 termination, forced to stop due to a sudden special situation at the match venue, where neither side achieved victory. Everyone gasped in unison, only Akino, who knew some inside information, could remain calm. Of course, there was another one, Asia, who was still a bit confused. Seeing her servant's shocked expressions, Rias couldn't help but give a bitter smile. Rias's servant team had only been formed for a short time, and their official match experience was almost 0. The opponent, on the other hand, was already a mature team that had worked together for an unknown amount of time and had been tested by dozens of battles. The gap between them was not just individual strength, but a total crushing in terms of team coordination, tactical execution, and on-the-spot adaptation. Graphia continued to report calmly, and with every point she made, everyone's hearts sank further. His current team rating points place him firmly at the forefront of the younger generation of devil nobility. His servant members are as follows. She showed the images one by one and gave brief explanations. The information roughly matched the original work in Shirakami Kaide's memory. Powerful rooks, skilled knights, bishops, specializing in magic and support, as well as multiple pawns, with tacit cooperation and individual strengths. The lineup was complete, with no obvious weaknesses. After the introduction, there was silence in the clearing. Although they knew Riser was strong before, Hearing such specific and brilliant achievements and data made the pressure feel real and overwhelming. Even Rias's expression was exceptionally solemn. So, Graphia's voice broke the silence. Recognizing the gap is the first step. There is no need for fear, but you must take it seriously. Over the next week, I will formulate a training plan based on each of your characteristics, positions, and the team's current problems. The goal is not to have you undergo a complete transformation in 1 week, that is impossible. The goal is to compensate for the most fatal weaknesses as much as possible, establish an initial effective team coordination model, and carry out limited targeted preparation for the known characteristics of the Phoenix team. She began to distribute the training outlines. Eldest Miss Rias, as the king, your training lies more in the control of your own power, the practice of tactical command, and how to deploy your servants according to changes on the battlefield. I will provide some classic battle cases and tactical models for your reference, but how specifically to integrate and apply them requires your own comprehension and practice. During this week, you need to deepen your understanding of each of your servants and clarify their roles under different tactics. Rias took it solemnly. I understand. Kaneko Tuju, Rook. Your advantage is power and close quarters explosive force. Your disadvantage is that your attack methods are relatively singular, lacking means to deal with mid to long range harassment. Your training direction is, while maintaining your strength advantage, increase the unpredictability of your movement and raids, and make preliminary attempts to project demonic power at mid to short ranges. There are many suitable targets in this mountain forest for you to practice on. Kaneko nodded. Kiba Yuto, Knight. Your swordsmanship and speed are your strengths, and your sword birth ability is versatile. But your strength may be insufficient when facing powerful defenses, and focusing too much on the sword can sometimes lead you to ignore the overall situation. Your training focus is to further elevate the limits of your speed and sword techniques, develop the auxiliary and control capabilities of your demonic swords, and strengthen your ability to capture and provide feedback on battlefield information during high-speed movement. Yes. Fighting spirit ignited in Yuto's eyes. Finally, Graphia's gaze fell upon Shirakami Kaide, Akino, and Asia. Himahima Akino, Queen. Shirakami Kaide, Asia Argento, Pawn, and Bishop. You three are the primary targets of my guidance this time. Akino, your power is great, but you rely too heavily on lightning strikes and lack means for close quarters adaptation and endurance battles. Asia, you possess a precious sacred gear, but you have no combat ability of your own and low magic power, making it extremely easy for you to become a breakthrough point. Shirakami Kaide. She looked at Shirakami Kaide. Your problem is the most complex. Your abilities are cluttered and lack a system, urgently needing integration and a solid foundation. Therefore, Graphia turned and looked into the depths of the forest. You three, follow me. The first task. Magic power pouring. After a brief farewell to Rias and the others, the three followed in Graphia's footsteps. It was unknown how long they walked. Graphia led the three to a clearing deeper in the forest surrounded by tall trees. She raised her hand and laid down several layers of barriers to isolate the inside from the outside. Here, without any reservations, release your magic power with all your strength and continuously, in the way you are most accustomed to invest it, until you are completely exhausted and cannot mobilize even a single shred more. Graphia commanded, I need to accurately know the basic data of each of your magic reserves, output characteristics, and recovery speeds. This will be the benchmark for all subsequent targeted training. Akino and Asia did not hesitate, each walking to one side of the clearing and beginning to condense their magic power. Lightning flashed around Akino's body, as arcs of electricity struck the ground or shot toward the barriers in the sky. Asia clasped her hands together, and a gentle, continuous emerald green healing light radiated outward. Shirakami Kaide also walked to his position and calmed his mind. He first mobilized the demonic magic he had cultivated himself, and after performing a stable amplification through the boosted gear, he released it outward in the form of magic bullets and simple energy shocks. He also tried to activate mirror reflection, simulating some weak energy forms to accelerate the consumption. Time passed minute by minute. Asia was the first to be unable to hold on, falling to the ground with a pale face, her forehead covered in cold sweat, and the magic power in her body completely bottomed out. Blue Star let out a worried low cry on her shoulder. Next was Shirakami Kaide. He could feel his cultivated magic power rapidly depleting, and the gauntlet on his left arm also dimmed. However, when his own magic power was exhausted, Grafia keenly noticed that there seemed to still be non-weak magic power fluctuations faintly circulating within his body, not having completely calmed down. Shirakami Kaide, you still have unreleased magic power in your body, Grafia pointed out. Shirakami Kaide stopped his movements and explained, Miss Grafia, this part of the magic power is a bit special. It wasn't accumulated through my own cultivation, but rather through some of my, well, special talents, slowly absorbed and stored from Rias and Akino during relatively close contact with them. He vaguely explained the effect of Crimson Draw as a talent of his succubus bloodline. Grafia's azure eyes glanced at him. She did not press for details and simply nodded. Release it all. I need the complete values. Okay. Shirakami Kaide concentrated his mind again, communicating with that newly opened, magic reserve pool, in his body. Instantly, magic power gurgled out again, and he released all of this stored magic power as well. In the end, Akino lasted the longest. When the lightning around her body completely extinguished and she stopped while panting slightly, the test ended. The result was without suspense. Akino's total magic power was the most abundant, and she lasted the longest. Shirakami Kaide, including his stored magic, was second. Asia's magic reserve was the least, and she lasted for the shortest time. At some point, a recording board had appeared in Grafia's hand, and she quickly recorded the data. She looked at the three, especially Shirakami Kaide and Asia. The data has been recorded. Akino, your magic foundation is solid, but there is room for improvement in output efficiency and conversion techniques. Asia, your magic reserve is a severe shortcoming that must be improved, otherwise, no matter how strong your sacred gear is, you won't be able to use it continuously. Finally, she looked at Shirakami Kaide, your situation is the most unique. Your own magic power growth is good, but what's more noteworthy is your magic storage ability. This might become a card for your endurance and burst, but how to combine it with your other abilities requires careful design. Next, I will give you the directions for your subsequent training. For the next 4 days, Shirakami Kaide, Akino, and Asia experienced what the silver-haired Annihilation Queen style special training was like. Grafia's training plan was precise and brutal. For Akino, she required her to perform extreme compression and instantaneous release of her vast magic power, discarding flashy wide-range lightning strikes. She pursued single-point penetration and absolute destruction efficiency, and simulated casting spells under the magic interference of the enemy, Queen Ubeluna. For Asia, the training turned completely to the other extreme, how to instantly judge the priority of injuries and perform the fastest and most effective healing under the chaos and pressure of the battlefield, and even learning to use healing magic for extremely limited defense or obstruction. And for Shirakami Kaide, Grafia's severity was the highest. She ruthlessly pointed out the fatal flaw of his weak basic magic power and required him to refine the use of boost into every breath. A large amount of high-intensity magic extraction and precision control practice caused Shirakami Kaide to collapse in exhaustion almost every day, only barely recovering thanks to Asia's subsequent healing. On the evening of the 4th day, when the final coordinated defense exercise ended and all three were nearly limp, Grafia rarely did not immediately arrange a new task. Training is suspended tonight, she announced calmly, pointing to a path hidden by bushes behind the wooden house. Follow this path for about 300 meters, and there is a natural hot spring. Soaking will help relieve fatigue and promote the self-repair of magic circuits. Hot spring. Light instantly lit up in the eyes of the exhausted trio. This was simply heavenly music in the midst of hellish training. Rias, Kaneko, and Yuto seemed to have received the same notice, returning to rendezvous from their respective special training locations almost simultaneously. Everyone carried a change of clothes and towels, walking along the path, and soon heard the sound of gurgling water, with the air filled with a faint smell of sulfur and warm water vapor. Passing through a bamboo forest, the view suddenly opened up. A natural hot spring pool nestled against the mountain wall appeared before them. The rocks were rugged, white mist rose from the water's surface, and under the reflection of the fading light and dotting lanterns, it appeared serene and inviting. The hot spring was roughly divided into two areas by natural rocks, clearly considering the separation of men and women. Finally, I can relax a bit. Rias also let out a long sigh of relief. She had been exhaustively researching tactics these past few days, and her pressure was no less significant. Well then, this way please, ladies tilde. Akino laughed and took the lead toward the women's pool, with Kaneko and Asia following behind. Rias glanced at Shirakami Kaide, a trace of a blush flitting across her face, before she also turned and left. Yuto patted Shirakami Kaide's shoulder. Shirakami-kun, let's go soak too. I feel like my bones are about to fall apart. The men's pool side was relatively simple, just a warm pool surrounded by rocks. Shirakami Kaide and Yuto soaked in the hot water. The warm spring water enveloped their aching bodies, making them unable to resist letting out comfortable sighs. The fatigue and tension of the past few days seemed to be pulled away bit by bit along with the rising steam. Miss Graphia's training really lives up to its reputation. Yuto spoke with his eyes closed, his voice filled with emotion. But it certainly makes one feel obvious progress. Shirakami-kun, what do you think? There is progress. Shirakami Kaide buried himself in the water up to his neck and grumbled, it's just that I feel a bit thoroughly hollowed out. A thought suddenly struck him. Hot spring. This is a hot spring. Clairvoyance, let's go. Since reaching LV8, besides the passive warnings and active glimpses into the future during combat, he had never properly tested its basic material penetration ability in daily life. This misty water vapor, the natural rocks separating the men's and women's pools, seemed like an excellent testing environment. Once this thought arose, it was a bit difficult to suppress. He didn't want to do anything indecent. At least that's what he told himself, it was purely a skill test. Right, test the penetration effect and clarity of LV8 clairvoyance in a complex environment. He took a deep breath, concentrated his mind, and a bit of mana flowed toward his eyes. To avoid being noticed by Yuto next to him, he pretended to rest his mind, while in reality, clairvoyance LV8 was quietly activated. His vision began to change. The originally thick, moss-covered rock barrier gradually became blurred and transparent in his vision. The interference of the water vapor was filtered out to a certain extent. The scene in the women's pool, like looking through a layer of frosted glass, dimly entered his sight. Then, Shirakami Kaide felt a surge of heat in his nasal cavity. In the hazy vision were four graceful figures soaking in the hot spring. Although the clairvoyance was affected by the steam and distance and wasn't perfectly clear, those breathtaking silhouettes and curves, and the snow-white skin appearing indistinctly in the water, were enough to make one's blood boil. He saw Rias leaning against the rocks by the pool, her long red hair wet and clinging to her rounded shoulders and exquisite collarbones. The water surface just reached the proud fullness of her chest, swaying slightly with the ripples. She had her eyes closed, seemingly relaxing and meditating, her profile looking exceptionally soft and beautiful in the mist. Akino sat in a shallower spot, the water only reaching her waist. She was lazily scooping up hot water with her hands and pouring it over her shoulders, the water sliding down her smooth back in those amazing curves. She seemed to sense something and suddenly turned her head, glancing toward the men's pool with a half-smile on her face, as if she could see through the rocks and know someone was testing a skill, making Shirakami Kaide's heart skip a beat. Kaneko was almost entirely curled up in the water, only showing her silver-haired little head and part of her shoulders. With her eyes closed, she looked like a bathing cat, completely different from her usual cold demeanor and appearing quite cute. Asia appeared more reserved, sitting on the edge with her hands hugging her knees, her eyes curiously surveying the surroundings. Her blonde hair was wet and clinging to her cheeks, possessing an unconscious allure amidst her purity. This hazy and erotic scene had a huge impact. Shirakami Kaide immediately felt his heart rate accelerate, his blood surge, and his face grow somewhat hot. Shirakami-kun. Your face is a bit red, have you been soaking for too long? Yuto asked with concern. No, it's fine. Maybe the water temperature is a bit high. Shirakami Kaide hurriedly covered up, burying half his face in the water to cool down. In his heart, however, he was reminiscing about the scene he just saw and Akino's glance that seemed to see through everything. She couldn't have actually noticed something, could she? About half an hour later, Yuto said he would go back to the wooden hut to organize his swords first and left. Only Shirakami Kaide remained in the men's pool. He was enjoying the peace of being alone, calculating whether to test the skill again, just for a bit. Suddenly, he heard the sound of water and faint voices from the women's pool. It seemed someone had gotten up. Before long, Akino's voice, tinged with laughter, sounded from beside the rock partition leading to the men's pool. Little by Shufeng tilde, are you still soaking? It seems our shampoo has run out. Do you have any on your side? Shirakami Kaide was startled and quickly replied, yes. Wait, I'll get it for you. He hurriedly stood up, grabbed the shampoo bottle sitting nearby, wrapped a towel around his waist, and walked to the rock partition. There was a natural gap there, not large, but enough to pass things through. Just as he handed the bottle over, a wet hand with the heat of the hot spring and an amazingly smooth touch grabbed his wrist. Senior Akino. Shirakami Kaide was stunned. In the next instant, a force pulled him, caught off guard. He was pulled directly through that rock gap. Splash! Shirakami Kaide fell into the warm water of the women's pool, water splashing everywhere. He hurriedly stood firm and wiped the water from his face. The scene before him made him instantly freeze, his brain going blank once again. Amidst the swirling mist, all four women were in the pool, their gazes now falling in unison on him, the uninvited guest. A rosy flush rose on Rias's face, and she instinctively shrank into the water, but in her eyes, besides embarrassment, there seemed to be a trace of indulgence. Akino looked at him with a beaming smile. She was the one who had just pulled him. Kaneko glanced at him expressionlessly and spat out a few words, erotic fung. Then she turned her face away, though her earlobes were a bit red. Asia let out a cry of surprise, her entire body almost burying itself in the water, only showing a pair of panicked big eyes, her cheeks completely red. Akino. What are you doing? Rias scolded. Akino just smiled, swam closer to Shirakami Kaide, not caring at all that her beautiful body curves were fully revealed in the ripples. She leaned into his ear and said in a whisper that only the two of them could hear. Also, was peeping fun just now, little by Shufeng. I'm very sensitive to your mana fluctuations, you know tilde. Shirakami Kaide's face turned red, he really had been discovered. I wasn't. I was just testing my ability. He tried to defend himself, but it sounded weak and powerless. Testing your ability. Rias raised an eyebrow and also understood. Her face turned even redder as she glared at him. Alright, since you're already here. Akino suddenly laughed, breaking the awkwardness. Why don't we just soak together? There's no one else anyway. Asia-chan, Kaneko, what do you think? Kaneko. Whatever. Asia. T together. This isn't right. It's fine, Asia. Rias sighed, seemingly having compromised. She looked at Shirakami Kaide with a warning in her eyes. However, if a certain someone dares to test things again, don't blame me for being impolite. Shirakami Kaide could only laugh dryly. Thus, in this secluded mountain hot spring, an extremely rare and erotic scene appeared. Shirakami Kaide was allowed to stay in the women's pool, mainly because Akino insisted and Rias half-reluctantly agreed. Although everyone was soaking in the water, that kind of unrestrained closeness and the pervading ambiguous atmosphere were unprecedented. Akino even intentionally swam to Shirakami Kaide's side, leaning against him, enjoying the stiffness of his body and the embarrassment on his face. Although Rias stayed a bit further away, her gaze drifted over from time to time. Kaneko remained cold-faced, but her occasionally glancing eyes also carried a trace of an indescribable meaning. The most shy, Asia, stayed far away in the corner, almost not daring to look this way. The mist rose, the water temperature was pleasant, and fatigue dissipated in the hot water. Although Shirakami Kaide was ordered not to use clairvoyance again, the real scene before him was already enough to make his heart race. Akino's occasional teasing little movements and Rias's occasional gentle glances all made the hot spring this night filled with a different kind of warmth. The misty steam and charming atmosphere of the hot springs gradually dissipated as everyone returned to their assigned wooden cabins. Although soreness still lingered in his body, the hot bath had indeed greatly relieved his mental fatigue. After returning to his room, Shirakami Kaide felt a bit thirsty and got up to go to the kitchen to pour a glass of water. On his way back to the room, he vaguely heard a faint movement outside. Pushing open the back door of the wooden cabin, the cool moonlight immediately spilled over him. The night in the mountains was exceptionally quiet, and the air carried a chill. Then, he saw that figure. Under an old tree not far away, Asia stood quietly, looking up at the dappled moonlight filtering through the gaps in the branches. She was wearing a simple, ankle-length pure white cotton nightgown with a plain style, fine ruffles at the cuffs and neckline, and a beige knit cardigan loosely draped over it. Her soft blonde hair was draped over her shoulders, shimmering faintly under the moonlight. The night breeze brushed past gently, swaying her hem and hair, making her look frail and imbuing her with a sense of fragile holiness. Shirakami Kaide hesitated for a moment but still walked over with light footsteps. As he got closer, he could see clearly by the moonlight that there seemed to be some undried tear stains at the corners of Asia's eyes, and her blue eyes were filled with a melancholy that even the moonlight couldn't dissolve. Asia! Shirakami Kaide called out softly. Asia's body trembled slightly, and she turned her head like a startled fawn. Seeing it was Shirakami Kaide, she hurriedly wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and forced a smile. Mr. Bai Shufeng, are you not resting yet? I came out to get some water. Shirakami Kaide walked to her side and looked at the moon with her. And you? It's so late, and you're out here alone in the cold wind, is something on your mind? Asia lowered her head, her hands nervously twisting the hem of her nightgown, and remained silent for a moment. The moonlight shone on her lowered eyelashes, casting a small shadow. Shirakami Kaide didn't rush her, just stood by her side quietly. After a long while, Asia spoke in a very, very small voice. It's nothing, just. I can't really sleep. Is that so? Shirakami Kaide didn't point out her tear stains. Instead, he teased her in a light tone. It's so cold out here. If you catch a cold and lack energy for training tomorrow, you'll be scolded by Miss Grafia, you know. Her icy gaze is even colder than this night breeze, isn't it? No, she won't. Asia subconsciously retorted, her voice a bit louder. Miss Grafia is strict, but she does it for our own good. She isn't scary at all. After retorting, she seemed to feel her reaction was a bit childish, and her face turned slightly red. But after Shirakami Kaide's interruption, her tense emotions seemed to loosen up a bit. She took a deep breath of the cold air and finally plucked up the courage to look up at Shirakami Kaide, her eyes filled with genuine confusion and pain. Mr. Bai Shufeng. Can I really continue to believe in the Lord? Her voice was trembling. I've been reincarnated as a devil. I can no longer chant his name. I can no longer read my favorite Bible. I can't even. Her voice choked up. As if having made a great decision, she slowly brought the hand she had been hiding behind her back to the front. Her right hand was carefully pinching a thin silver chain. At the end of the chain hung a simple silver cross. She only held the chain, keeping her fingers as far away from the cross itself as possible. Even so, Shirakami Kaide could clearly see her open, fair left palm by the moonlight. There were several fresh red marks with signs of burning. Clearly, she had tried to touch the cross directly earlier. Look. Asia's voice was as low as a whisper. I can't even hold it tight. Has the Lord really abandoned me? This heretic. Is my current existence itself a form of blasphemy against him? Tears welled up in her eyes again, but this time they didn't fall. They only made her blue eyes more watery, filled with helplessness and self-doubt. Looking at the scars and the hanging cross that seemed to have invisible thorns for her now, Shirakami Kaide felt a stir in his heart. A thought flashed through his mind like lightning, mirror reflection. That skill not only could mimic the offensive power of light, but its attached analysis ability might be able to. Without the slightest hesitation, he immediately concentrated his mind. First, he used mirror reflection to simulate a spear of light, but the target was not to attack. Instead, he tried to analyze the essence of the holy attribute that caused repulsion and harm to devils, and attempted to use his own demonic power to simulate, cover, and neutralize it. To put it simply, it was like using his own power to create a pair of gloves that were essentially demonic power but possessed the characteristics of the power of light. Faint demonic power circulated in his right palm, and a very thin, almost invisible, warm milky white glow gradually covered his hand. Asia, Shirakami Kaide stretched out his hand covered in the faint light, palm upward, and said calmly, "Try placing the cross on my hand." Asia was stunned, her blue eyes filled with confusion and worry. Mr. Bai Shufeng. No. You're a devil too, you'll get hurt. Trust me this once. Shirakami Kaide looked at her, his eyes showing no joke, only encouragement. Just place it on gently. After hesitating again and again, seeing Shirakami Kaide's firm gaze, Asia finally bit her lower lip and carefully pinched the chain, gently placing the small silver cross in the center of Shirakami Kaide's glowing palm. The moment the cross touched his palm, hiss! Shirakami Kaide's brow furrowed sharply, he sucked in a breath of cold air, and his hand twitched almost imperceptibly. Ah! Take it away quickly! Asia cried out in alarm, instinctively reaching out to snatch the cross back. However, the moment she reached out, Shirakami Kaide suddenly closed his fingers, tightly gripping the cross in his palm. Mr. Bai Shufeng. Asia was truly anxious now. But in the next second, she saw the smile on Shirakami Kaide's face, one that hinted at a successful prank. Fooled you. Shirakami Kaide opened his hand, and no burn marks appeared on his palm. He had succeeded. That layer of faint light was still stubbornly covering his hand, and the part in contact with the cross emitted a slightly brighter light, as if performing a continuous neutralization. See, I'm fine. You're really something. Asia finally realized she had been teased. Both angry and anxious, her cheeks puffed up, and she couldn't help but raise her small fist to lightly punch Shirakami Kaide's arm, with a force as light as a tickle. But after this, the tears in her eyes were instead mostly dispersed, replaced by a bit of genuine liveliness. All right, no more joking. Shirakami Kaide stopped smiling, his expression turning serious again. He maintained his posture of holding the cross in his right hand, then extended his left hand and gently grasped Asia's right wrist. Asia hadn't yet realized what he was about to do. Shirakami Kaide guided her, making her open her palm with the burn marks, and then he gently placed his right hand, which was holding the cross, onto her palm, letting their palms press together with the cross in between. At the same time, he urged his demonic power to carefully guide that warm light, which carried a sense of isolation, along the skin where they touched, slowly covering and spreading over Asia's entire right hand, especially her palm. Asia was initially a bit nervous and confused, but gradually, her blue eyes grew wider and wider, filled with unbelievable shock. A feeling, a long-lost, crystal-clear sensation was coming from her palm. It was no longer a burning pain, no longer an illusion separated by an invisible barrier. That's the end of part 3. Part 4 is coming soon.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and support our channel for more stories.